The livestream comments were brutal. "She's pathetic. Just dump her already. This is embarrassing to watch." Sienna Park stared at her boyfriend's phone screen, watching strangers mock her heartbreak in real time while he smirked across the table of the upscale Los Angeles fusion restaurant. "Baby, relax," Matthias said loudly, angling the camera to capture her tear-streaked face. "The viewers think you're overreacting. It's just harmless flirting with my co-workers." But they both knew it wasn't flirting. The photos on his phone told a different story: intimate moments with other women, proud documentation of his infidelity, and now he was turning her humiliation into content for his social media empire. Sienna's hands trembled as she stood, the ambient jazz and clinking glasses blurring into white noise. That's when a shadow moved from a private booth behind her, deliberate, silent, commanding. The entire restaurant seemed to hold its breath. She didn't know his name yet, only that when this stranger stepped between her and Matthias, his presence didn't shout danger, it whispered it. Tall, devastatingly composed in a charcoal suit that fit like precision itself, he moved with the fluid grace of someone accustomed to control. "She said no," the man said, his voice low and accented with perfect English. "You're done filming." Matthias scoffed, still streaming. "Who the hell are you?" The stranger's dark eyes never left Sienna's face as he answered. "A man who doesn't tolerate cruelty." Then he leaned closer to her, just enough for only her to hear, his voice soft and startlingly sincere. "I'll treat you right, if you let me." Welcome back to Korean Mafia lovers. Tell us where you're watching from in the comments and don't forget to subscribe to the channel. We need your support to keep creating these emotional stories that touch your heart. Sienna Park had built her life on careful choices. At 26, she ran a small but respected graphic design studio from her downtown LA apartment, creating brand identities for local businesses who couldn't afford the big agencies. Her work was her sanctuary: clean lines, purposeful colors, everything in its place. Everything except her relationship with Matthias Chen. 3 years of dating a wannabe influencer had taught her that love and logic rarely occupied the same space. Matthias was charming, ambitious, and completely convinced that his lifestyle vlogs would make him the next big thing. What she hadn't realized was that his content strategy included documenting their most private moments for public consumption. The fusion restaurant had been his choice, trendy enough for good lighting, expensive enough to impress his followers. She dressed carefully in a soft beige wrap dress, thinking they were celebrating her landing a major client. Instead, she'd walked into an ambush. "You're being dramatic," Matthias continued, his phone still recording as other diners began to stare. "My followers love relationship content. This is good for both our brands." "I don't have a brand," Sienna whispered, mortification burning through her chest. "I have a life and you're destroying it." That's when the stranger appeared. Min Jae-ri moved through the restaurant like he owned it, which Sienna would later learn he essentially did. The Ri family had interests in half the upscale establishments in Koreatown and beyond, but in that moment, she only saw a man who stepped between her and her humiliation with the quiet authority of someone who'd never had to raise his voice to be heard. "Sir, this is a private conversation," Matthias said, his bravado faltering as he took in the stranger's expensive suit and the subtle deference of nearby staff. "No," Min-jae replied calmly, in perfect, unaccented English. "This is harassment, and it ends now." The restaurant had gone silent except for the soft jazz still playing overhead. Sienna felt the weight of dozens of eyes, the glow of Matthias's phone screen, the suffocating pressure of being a spectacle. But when she looked at the Korean man who'd intervened, she saw something unexpected in his dark eyes. Not pity, not judgment, just concern. "I need to leave," she managed, her voice barely audible. Min-jae nodded once. "Of course." He turned to Matthias, his tone dropping several degrees. "Delete the footage." "I don't have to." "You do." The words were spoken quietly, but something in Min-jae's posture made Matthias's hand shake as he fumbled with his phone. Within seconds, the live stream ended. Sienna didn't wait to see more. She grabbed her purse and walked toward the exit, her heels clicking against the polished floor with each determined step. Behind her, she heard Mateus calling her name, his voice pitched high with panic, now that his audience was gone. The cool Los Angeles evening hit her face as she pushed through the restaurant's glass doors. The street was busy with typical Thursday night traffic, couples heading to dinner, groups of friends bar hopping, everyone living their lives while hers felt like it was crumbling. "Miss," she turned to find the stranger following her, but he maintained a respectful distance. Up close, she could see he was probably in his early 30s, with sharp cheekbones and an understated elegance that spoke of old money and older traditions. His suit was perfectly tailored, his dark hair styled with precision, but it was his eyes that caught her attention, intelligent, watchful, and surprisingly gentle. "Are you all right?" he asked, his English flawless and warm. Sienna almost laughed. Was she all right? She'd just been publicly humiliated by the man she'd thought she might marry, turned into content for strangers to mock, and rescued by someone who looked like he'd stepped out of a Korean drama. "I will be," she said instead, because it felt like the truth she needed to believe. Min-jae nodded, then shrugged out of his suit jacket. "You're shivering." She hadn't noticed, but he was right. The evening air was cooler than she'd expected, and shock had left her trembling. When he held out the jacket, she hesitated. "I don't even know your name." "Min-jae," he said simply. "Min-jae Ri." Something about the way he said it suggested she should recognize it, but Sienna had never moved in circles, where Korean family names carried weight. She was a small business owner from a middle-class black family in Inglewood, not someone who knew the players in LA's underground economy. "Sienna Park," she replied, accepting the jacket. It was warm from his body heat and smelled like expensive cologne and something distinctly masculine. "It's nice to meet you." "Sienna Park," Min-jae said, and the way he pronounced her name, careful, respectful, made something tight in her chest loosen slightly. They stood in comfortable silence for a moment, watching the city move around them. Finally, Sienna spoke. "Thank you for what you did in there." "No man should treat a woman that way," Min-jae replied, his voice adding weight to the words, "especially not someone he claims to love." The simple statement hit harder than any grand gesture could have. Here was a stranger who understood something Mateus had never grasped, that love was supposed to protect, not exploit. "I should go," Sienna said, though she found herself reluctant to leave. There was something steadying about Min-jae's presence, like standing next to a mountain that had weathered countless storms. "Of course." He pulled a business card from his wallet, heavy cardstock with elegant Korean characters alongside English text. "If you need anything at all." Sienna looked at the card. Ri Enterprises, Import, Export. A downtown address in one of the city's most expensive buildings. "What kind of importing do you do?" she asked. Min-jae's smile was slight but genuine, the kind that keeps Los Angeles running smoothly. It wasn't really an answer, but something told her it was all the answer she'd get tonight. She pocketed the card and started to remove his jacket. "Keep it," he said. "Return it when you're ready." As Sienna walked to her car, she found herself looking back once. Min-jae was still standing where she'd left him, hands in his pockets, watching to make sure she got safely to her vehicle. It was such a small gesture, but after 3 years with someone who'd never once walked her to her car, it felt monumental. She drove home through the glittering sprawl of Los Angeles, Min-jae's jacket wrapped around her shoulders like armor, and for the first time in months, she didn't feel completely alone. What she didn't know was that Min-jae Ri had been watching her for weeks, not in a predatory way, but with the careful attention of a man who recognized something rare when he saw it. He'd noticed her at the coffee shop near his office building, sketching designs while she waited for her order. He'd seen her helping an elderly Korean woman navigate the bus schedule, switching effortlessly between English and broken Korean with patient kindness. And tonight, when he'd seen her being humiliated by someone who should have protected her, something protective and possessive had awakened in him that he'd thought buried years ago. Min-jae Ri was a man who controlled every aspect of his world. But watching Sienna Park drive away in his jacket, he realized control might be the last thing he wanted when it came to her. The white camellias arrived the next morning. Sienna stared at the elegant bouquet sitting outside her apartment door, accompanied by a note written in precise English. "For new beginnings, if you need a quiet place to sit, my rooftop garden is open to you. M." She'd spent the night alternating between fury and humiliation, replaying every moment of Matthias's betrayal while his jacket hung over her desk chair like a question mark. The flowers felt like an answer she wasn't sure she was ready to hear. Her phone had been buzzing constantly, Matthias calling, texting, leaving increasingly desperate voicemails. She'd finally turned it off and thrown it in a drawer, but the damage was done. His livestream had been saved and shared across social media platforms. "Sienna deserves better" was trending, which somehow made everything worse. The last thing she wanted was to be a viral moment. Sienna brought the flowers inside and set them on her kitchen counter, their pristine white petals a stark contrast to the chaos of her emotions. She had work to do, a logo design for a new Korean BBQ restaurant in Koreatown that was due by the end of the week. The irony wasn't lost on her, but as she sat at her computer, trying to focus on color palettes and typography, her mind kept drifting to Min Jae-ri, the way he'd moved through that restaurant like he belonged everywhere and nowhere, the careful distance he'd maintained while still making her feel protected, the genuine concern in his voice when he'd asked if she was all right. "If you need a quiet place to sit." By 3 in the afternoon, Sienna found herself standing outside Ri Enterprises, a gleaming 40-story tower in downtown LA's financial district. The building was all glass and steel, the kind of place where million-dollar deals were made over handshakes and imported whiskey. She felt underdressed in her jeans and oversized sweater, but the security guard recognized Min Jae's name immediately and directed her to a private elevator that required a key card. Someone had called ahead. The rooftop was a revelation. What she'd expected to be a typical corporate space was instead a carefully curated garden that felt like stepping into another world. Miniature trees in ceramic pots lined stone pathways. A small waterfall trickled over smooth rocks into a koi pond. Traditional Korean pavilion provided shade over comfortable seating areas. And in the center of it all, Min Jae-ri knelt beside a bonsai tree, his expensive suit replaced by dark jeans and a white button-down shirt rolled up to his elbows. He looked younger this way, more approachable, though no less commanding. "You came," he said without looking up from his work, carefully trimming tiny branches with specialized tools. His English was perfect, each word precisely chosen. "I needed somewhere quiet," Sienna admitted, settling onto a nearby bench. "My apartment feels too small today." Min Jae nodded, understanding without explanation. "This tree is over 50 years old," he said, his hands gentle as he worked. "My grandfather started it when he first came to America. He said patience was the only way to create something beautiful." "Is that what you're doing? Creating something beautiful?" "Trying to." He glanced at her then, and she saw something vulnerable in his expression. Sometimes the most damaged trees grow the strongest, if you know how to care for them properly. They sat in comfortable silence, the sounds of the city muted by the garden's careful design. Sienna found herself studying Min Jae's profile, the sharp line of his jaw, the concentration in his dark eyes, the way his hands moved with practiced precision. There was something almost meditative about watching him work. "What do you do?" she asked eventually. "Really, I mean, import-export covers a lot of territory." Min Jae's hands stilled for a moment. "My family has been in Los Angeles for 3 generations. We help businesses navigate complicated situations, logistics, security, ensuring things run smoothly." It wasn't a complete answer, but Sienna sensed it was more honest than what he told most people. She'd grown up in LA. She knew there were layers to the city that most people never saw. Families with old money and older secrets. Businesses that operated in the spaces between legal and illegal. "Are you dangerous?" she asked quietly. "To you? Never." The certainty in his voice was absolute. "To people who would hurt what I care about? Yes." The admission should have frightened her. Instead, it made her feel safer than she had in years. Matthias had never been able to protect her from anything, not his own infidelity, not public humiliation, not even his own followers' cruelty. But this man, this stranger who'd stepped between her and harm without hesitation, radiated the kind of strength that could weather any storm. "Why did you help me last night?" Sienna asked. Minjay set down his tools and turned to face her fully. "Because I've been watching you." The words should have sounded creepy, but his tone was matter-of-fact, almost apologetic. "Not stalking," he clarified quickly, "but I've seen you at the coffee shop near my office. You always order the same thing, large coffee, no sugar, extra cream. You tip well even when service is slow. Last week you spent 20 minutes helping Mrs. Kim figure out the bus schedule, even though you were clearly late for something." Sienna remembered that morning. She'd been rushing to a client meeting when she'd noticed the elderly woman looking confused at the bus stop. "You noticed that?" "I notice everything," Minjay said simply. "It's how I stay alive. But you were different. Kind without expecting anything in return. Beautiful without trying to be. Real in a city full of people performing their lives." Heat rose in Sienna's cheeks. "You don't know me." "No," he agreed, "but I'd like to." The honesty in his voice made something flutter in her chest. When was the last time someone had wanted to know her, really know her, rather than just what she could do for them? "I just got out of a relationship," she said, though it felt inadequate to describe the wreckage Matthias had left behind. "I know." Minjay's voice was gentle. "I'm not asking you to replace him. I'm asking if you'd like to have dinner with someone who won't film it." Despite everything, Sienna laughed. The sound surprised her. She hadn't thought she'd be able to laugh for weeks. "That's a low bar," she said. "Sometimes low bars are the most important ones to clear." They talked until the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold that reflected off the glass towers surrounding them. Minjay told her about growing up between two cultures, never quite Korean enough for his grandfather's generation, never quite American enough for his classmates. Sienna shared her dreams of expanding her design business, maybe opening a real studio instead of working from her apartment. "What's stopping you?" Minjay asked. "Money, connections, the usual things that stop people like me from competing with people like—" She gestured at the luxury surrounding them. "People like me. You know what I mean." Minjay was quiet for a long moment. "My grandfather came here with nothing. Less than nothing. He owed money to people who don't forgive debts. But he understood something that took me years to learn. What's that? Power isn't about what you have. It's about what you're willing to sacrifice to protect what matters." As the evening deepened, Minjay walked her back to the elevator. In the enclosed space, Sienna became acutely aware of his presence, the way he smelled like cedar and something distinctly masculine, the way he stood just close enough to make her feel protected, without crowding her. "Thank you," she said as the elevator descended, "for the garden, for listening, for not making me feel like a charity case." "You could never be that," Minjay replied, his voice low and serious. "You're the strongest person I've met in a long time. I don't feel strong." "Strength isn't about not being hurt," he said as the elevator doors opened. "It's about what you do after the hurt finds you." Sienna stepped into the lobby, then turned back. "Minjay?" "Yes?" "I'd like that dinner, somewhere without cameras." His smile was small but genuine, transforming his entire face. "I know just the place." As Sienna drove home through the neon-lit streets of Los Angeles, she realized something had shifted inside her. For the first time in 3 years, she wasn't thinking about Matthias or what he'd done to her. She was thinking about tomorrow, and the man who'd offered her kindness without expecting anything in return. What she didn't know was that across the city, Matthias was discovering that his social media accounts had been mysteriously suspended, his followers disappearing as quickly as they'd appeared. The video of their confrontation had vanished from every platform, as if it had never existed. And in his penthouse office, Minjay Rhee was making phone calls in rapid Korean, ensuring that Sienna Park would never be humiliated online again. Some protection, he'd learned long ago, worked best when it remained invisible. The restaurant Minjay chose was nothing like the trendy fusion place where her world had imploded. Hidden in a narrow alley in Koreatown, it had no sign in English, just elegant Korean characters carved into dark wood. The interior was intimate and warm, with traditional low tables and soft lighting that made everything feel like a secret. "My grandmother used to bring me here," Minjay explained as they were seated in a private corner booth, speaking in his perfect English. The owner's family has been making the same recipes for 60 years. Sienna looked around at the other diners, mostly older Korean couples, a few families with children, everyone speaking in hushed, respectful tones. It was the opposite of Matthias's world, where every meal was performed for an audience. "No one's taking pictures," she observed. "They wouldn't dare," Minjay said, and something in his tone suggested it wasn't just about restaurant etiquette. The food arrived in waves, banchan side dishes, perfectly grilled bulgogi, kimchi that made her eyes water in the best way. Minjay ordered in Korean, his voice taking on different rhythms and inflections, but when he turned back to her, he switched seamlessly to English. "You sound different when you speak Korean," she said. "More myself," he admitted. "English is my business language. Korean is my heart language. What does your heart language tell you about me?" Minjay's eyes met hers across the table. "That you are beautiful," he said softly in English. Heat flooded Sienna's cheeks, but she didn't look away. "Teach me something in Korean." "Thank you," Minjay said slowly, pronouncing each syllable clearly in English first, then repeating it in Korean. "It's one of the most important phrases in any language." Sienna tried to repeat the Korean phrase, stumbling over the unfamiliar sounds. Minjay's smile was patient as he corrected her pronunciation, his voice gentle and encouraging. It was such a small thing, but Matthias had never shown interest in her family's traditions, had never asked about the Gullah words her grandmother still used, or the recipes passed down through generations of strong black women. "Tell me about your family," Minjay said as they shared dessert, a delicate rice cake that dissolved on her tongue like sweetened clouds. Sienna found herself talking about her parents' small house in Inglewood, her father's work as a mechanic, her mother's job at the local elementary school. She told him about Sunday dinners, where her aunts argued politics over her grandmother's cornbread, about the way her family had scraped together money to help her through design school. "They sound wonderful," Minjay said, and she could tell he meant it. "What about your family?" Minjay's expression grew more guarded. "Complicated. My grandfather built our business from nothing, but the cost was high. My father tried to legitimize things, make us respectable. I'm still trying to figure out what that means. Is that why you have the garden? To find peace? Among other things." Minjay's fingers drummed against the table, a rare show of nervousness. "Sienna, there are things about my life that might frighten you. Things I can't change even if I wanted to." She studied his face, the sharp cheekbones, the intelligent eyes, the mouth that could be hard or gentle depending on the circumstances. "Are you trying to scare me away? I'm trying to be honest with you." "Then be honest. What do you really do?" Minjay was quiet for a long moment, weighing his words. "My family controls certain interests in Los Angeles. We ensure that businesses in our territory operate safely. We resolve disputes that can't be handled through official channels. We protect people who can't protect themselves." "You're talking about the Korean Mafia. That's a crude term for something more nuanced, but..." "Yes." Sienna absorbed this information. She'd suspected, of course, the way people deferred to him, the expensive clothes, the rooftop garden that suggested serious money. But hearing it confirmed was different. "Have you ever hurt anyone?" "Yes." No hesitation, no justification, just truth. "Have you ever killed anyone?" Minjay's eyes never left hers. "Yes." The admission hung between them like a bridge neither could cross. Sienna thought about the man who'd stepped between her and humiliation, who tended bonsai trees with gentle hands, who'd spent an hour teaching her Korean phrases with infinite patience. "Why are you telling me this? Because you deserve to know what you're getting into, because I won't lie to you, even if the truth costs me everything." Sienna reached across the table and placed her hand over his. His skin was warm, his fingers strong and scarred in places she hadn't noticed before. "I'm not naive," she said quietly. "I know this city has layers. I know there are people who operate outside the law. What I need to know is, are you a good man who does bad things, or a bad man who does good things?" Minjay turned his hand palm up, threading their fingers together. "I don't know anymore, but I know that when I'm with you, I want to be better than I am." The vulnerability in his voice made her chest tight. When was the last time someone had wanted to be better for her? Matthias had expected her to accept his flaws, to enable his worst impulses, to shrink herself to accommodate his ego. "I need time," she said, "to think about this, about us." "Of course." Min-jae squeezed her hand gently. "Take all the time you need. I'm not going anywhere." As they left the restaurant, Sienna felt the weight of eyes watching them. Not hostile exactly, but assessing. She realized that being seen with Min-jae Ri marked her as someone significant, someone under his protection. The thought should have terrified her. Instead, it made her feel safer than she had in years. Min-jae walked her to her car, his presence a solid comfort in the neon-lit night. As she unlocked her door, he caught her hand. "Sienna," his voice was rough with emotion, "whatever you decide, know that meeting you has changed something in me. Something I thought was dead." Before she could respond, he lifted her hand to his lips and pressed a soft kiss to her knuckles. Old-fashioned, respectful, and somehow more intimate than anything Matthias had ever done. "Good night," he said simply in his perfect English, then waited until she was safely in her car before disappearing into the shadows. As Sienna drove home, her hand still tingling from his kiss, she realized she was at a crossroads. She could return to her safe, predictable life, find someone conventional and uncomplicated, or she could step into something dangerous and beautiful and utterly transformative. For the first time in her life, the dangerous choice felt like the right one. But what she didn't know was that her choice was about to be made for her. Across the city, Matthias was meeting with people who had no interest in her happiness, people who saw her connection to Min-jae Ri as an opportunity to settle old scores. The storm was coming, and Sienna was about to learn that sometimes love meant fighting for the right to exist in the same world. The first sign of trouble came 3 days later, when Sienna's biggest client suddenly cancelled their contract without explanation. Then her landlord called, claiming there had been complaints about her business operating from a residential building, complaints that had never existed before. By the end of the week, 2 more clients had backed out, citing vague concerns about reputation management. Sienna knew it wasn't coincidence. She was working late in her apartment, trying to salvage what remained of her business, when her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Enjoying your new boyfriend? Some relationships come with consequences. M. Not Min-jae. Matthias." Her blood ran cold as she realized what was happening. Matthias had figured out who Min-jae was, and he was using that knowledge to destroy her life piece by piece. Another text arrived. "Meet me at Griffith Observatory. Midnight. Come alone, or I release everything I have on your Korean boyfriend, and trust me, I have a lot." Sienna stared at the message, her hands shaking. She thought about calling Min-jae, but what could she say? That her ex-boyfriend was threatening to expose his business? That she'd become a liability just by caring about him? Instead, she grabbed her keys and headed for the door. Griffith Observatory at midnight was a different world. Empty parking lots, darkened buildings, the city sprawling below like a circuit board of lights. Matthias was waiting by the edge of the overlook, his phone in his hand, that familiar smirk playing at his lips. "You came," he said as she approached. "Smart girl. What do you want, Matthias?" "What I've always wanted. You. Back where you belong." Sienna almost laughed. "After what you did, after you humiliated me in front of thousands of people?" "That was just content, baby. You know I love you." His voice took on the wheedling tone she'd once found charming. "This thing with the Korean guy, it's just rebound. You're trying to hurt me." "This isn't about you," Sienna said firmly. "It never was about you. It was about me, finally realizing I deserve better." Matthias's expression darkened. "Better? You think a criminal is better than me? I think a man who protects me is better than one who exploits me." "Protects you?" Matthias laughed harshly. "Do you have any idea who Min-jae Ri really is, what his family does?" "I know enough." "Do you know about the warehouse fire in 2019, the one that killed 3 people? Do you know about the shipping containers full of girls from Southeast Asia? Do you know about the judges and politicians on his payroll?" Each accusation hit like a physical blow. Sienna had known Min-jae was dangerous, but this painted him as a monster. "You're lying." I have proof. Matthias held up his phone. Photos, documents, recordings, everything the FBI would need to put your boyfriend away for life. Unless what? Unless you come back to me, publicly. Make a video apologizing for the misunderstanding. Tell everyone we're working things out. Do that, and I delete everything. Sienna felt trapped between two impossible choices. Stay with Matthias and live a lie, or watch Minjae's life be destroyed because of her. I need time to think. You have until tomorrow night. There's a party at the Chateau Marmont. Influencers, media people, everyone who matters. Show up as my girlfriend or I start uploading files. As Matthias walked away, leaving her alone with the glittering city below, Sienna felt more lost than she ever had. She thought about Minjae's gentle hands tending his bonsai trees, the way he'd looked at her like she was precious, the English phrases he'd used to teach her about Korean culture with infinite patience. Was it all a lie? Was she just another naive woman falling for a beautiful monster? She drove home in a daze, Matthias's accusations echoing in her mind. But as she pulled into her apartment complex, she saw a familiar figure waiting by her door. Minjae. He looked up as she approached, and she saw immediately that something was wrong. His usual composure was cracked, his expensive suit rumpled, a cut on his cheekbone that hadn't been there before. "What happened?" she asked, forgetting her doubts in the face of his obvious distress. "Rival family. They thought they could use you to get to me." His voice was rough with exhaustion, and something that might have been fear. "I handled it, but Sienna, I can't promise this won't happen again." "What do you mean they thought they could use me?" Minjae's eyes met hers, and she saw the truth there before he spoke. "They took photos of us at dinner. They were planning to kidnap you, use you as leverage." The world tilted sideways. "Because of me? Because I'm with you? Because you matter to me," Minjae said simply. "Because hurting you would destroy me more effectively than any bullet." Sienna sank onto her doorstep, overwhelmed. "Matthias knows. About you, about your family. He's threatening to expose everything unless I go back to him." Minjae went very still. "What did you tell him?" "Nothing. Yet. But Minjae, the things he said, are they true? The warehouse fire? The trafficking, all of it?" For a long moment, Minjae didn't answer. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. "Some of it. Not all, but some." "Did you kill those people in the warehouse?" "No. But I didn't stop it from happening when I could have. The trafficking. We shut down 3 operations last year, saved 47 women. But yes, there are still routes we haven't found, still people we haven't saved." Sienna looked at this man she was falling in love with, really looked at him. She saw the weight he carried, the guilt that shadowed his eyes, the way he held himself like someone expecting judgment. "Why?" she asked. "Why do you stay in this life if it costs so much?" "Because walking away means other people take over. Worse people, people who don't care about collateral damage." Minjae sat beside her on the step, careful not to touch her. "My grandfather built this empire on blood and fear. My father tried to add honor to it. I'm trying to add mercy. And if I can't live with that," Minjae's smile was heartbreaking, "then I'll understand and I'll make sure you're safe. Even if it means staying away from you." Sienna thought about Matthias's ultimatum, about the choice between 2 impossible futures. Then she thought about the man beside her, flawed, dangerous, but fundamentally good in ways Matthias could never understand. "I need to tell you something," she said, and explained about the meeting at Griffith Observatory, about Matthias's threats and demands. When she finished, Minjae was quiet for a long time. Finally, he stood and pulled out his phone. "What are you doing?" "Calling my lawyer. If Matthias wants to play games, he should understand the rules first." "Minjae, no. I don't want you to hurt him." "I'm not going to hurt him," Minjae said, his voice deadly calm. "I'm going to destroy him, legally, thoroughly, and permanently. By tomorrow morning, Matthias Chen will have bigger problems than your love life." As Minjae made his calls, speaking in rapid Korean to people who clearly jumped when he spoke, Sienna realized something profound. For the first time in her life, someone was fighting for her. Not asking her to fight for herself, not expecting her to handle everything alone, but actually stepping up to protect what mattered to him. It should have felt like losing her independence. Instead, it felt like coming home. But the war for their future was just beginning, and neither of them knew that Matthias had one more card to play, one that would test everything they thought they knew about love, loyalty, and the price of choosing each other. The Chateau Marmont was blazing with lights and paparazzi when Sienna arrived the next evening. She'd spent the day in Minjay's penthouse while his security team ensured her safety, watching him work with an efficiency that was both impressive and terrifying. By noon, Matthias's social media accounts had been permanently suspended for violating terms of service. By 3, his management company had dropped him citing contractual irregularities. By 5, the IRS had announced an audit of his finances. How? Sienna had asked, watching Minjay coordinate everything with calm precision. Matthias forgot that influence without substance is just noise, Minjay had replied, and noise can be silenced. But Matthias had one final play, and he was making it tonight. Sienna walked into the hotel's garden party, wearing a black dress that Minjay had sent to her apartment. Elegant, expensive, and clearly marking her as someone under powerful protection. She felt the weight of eyes as she moved through the crowd, whispers following in her wake. She found Matthias holding court near the pool, surrounded by other influencers and wannabe celebrities. He looked up as she approached, his smile sharp and predatory. "Sienna, you came after all." His voice carried across the party, drawing attention. "Everyone, this is my girlfriend. We had a little misunderstanding, but we're working things out." "No," Sienna said clearly, her voice carrying in the sudden quiet. "We're not." Matthias's smile faltered. "Baby, don't be like this. Not in front of everyone." "You mean don't be honest in front of everyone?" Sienna stepped closer, her voice steady despite her racing heart. "Don't tell them how you cheated on me repeatedly, how you filmed my heartbreak for content, how you've spent the last week trying to blackmail me into coming back." The crowd was watching now, phones appearing as people sensed drama. But for once, Sienna didn't care about being recorded. This was her moment to take back her narrative. "You're being dramatic," Matthias said, but his voice lacked its usual confidence. "Am I? Then let's talk about the photos you claim to have, the ones you threatened to release unless I humiliated myself for your followers." Matthias's face went pale. "Sienna, stop. Or what? You'll ruin my life. You already tried that. You called my clients, threatened my business, tried to destroy everything I'd built, because you couldn't accept that I'd found someone better." "Better?" Matthias's voice cracked. "You mean that criminal you're sleeping with?" The words hung in the air like a slap. Sienna felt the crowd's attention sharpen, felt the phones focusing on her face, but instead of shame, she felt only clarity. "I mean a man who treats me with respect," she said quietly. "A man who protects me instead of exploiting me. A man who sees my worth instead of my usefulness." That's when she heard it, the sound of expensive shoes on marble, conversations dying as people turned to look. Sienna didn't need to turn around to know who was approaching. She could feel Minjay's presence like a change in atmospheric pressure. "Is there a problem here?" His voice was calm, conversational, but something in it made several people step back. Matthias tried to rally his bravado. "Just having a conversation with my girlfriend." "Ex-girlfriend," Sienna corrected, finally turning to look at Minjay. He was dressed in a perfectly tailored black suit, his dark hair styled with precision, but it was his eyes that caught her attention. They were focused entirely on her, as if Matthias and the crowd and the cameras didn't exist. "Are you all right?" he asked softly in his perfect English. "I am now." Minjay nodded, then turned his attention to Matthias. "I believe you have something that belongs to me." "What?" "The files you claim to have. The photos, the documents, the recordings." Minjay's smile was sharp as a blade. "I'd like them back." Matthias laughed nervously. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Of course you do. The question is whether you're going to return them voluntarily, or whether I'm going to have to take them." The threat was delivered so calmly, so matter-of-factly, that it took a moment for its implications to sink in. When they did, Matthias took a step back. "You can't threaten me. Not here. Not in front of all these people. I'm not threatening you, Minjae said reasonably. I'm offering you a choice. Return what you stole, apologize to Sienna for the harassment and walk away, or face the consequences of trying to extort a member of my family. Family? Matthias's voice was high with panic now. Minjae's hand found Sienna's, his fingers threading through hers with gentle possessiveness. Family, he confirmed, and I protect what's mine. The words sent a shiver through Sienna that had nothing to do with fear. When Minjae said she was his, it didn't feel like ownership, it felt like belonging. Matthias looked around wildly, as if expecting support from the crowd. But the other party guests had melted away, suddenly finding reasons to be elsewhere. Even the most attention-hungry influencers understood that some moments were too dangerous to document. This isn't over, Matthias said, but his voice lacked conviction. Yes, Minjae replied calmly. It is. What happened next would become legend in certain circles of Los Angeles society. Matthias reached for his phone, presumably to make good on his threats, but found his hand empty. The device had simply vanished, along with the backup drives in his car and the cloud storage accounts he'd thought were secure. How? You're not the only one with technical skills, Minjae said mildly. The difference is mine are better. As Matthias stood there, powerless and exposed, Sienna felt something shift inside her. This wasn't just about choosing between two men anymore. This was about choosing who she wanted to be, someone who lived in fear of other people's power, or someone who stood beside someone powerful enough to protect what mattered. I'll treat you right. Minjae had promised that first night. And he had. Not just with expensive gifts or grand gestures, but with respect, with honesty, with the kind of protection that came from genuine care rather than possessive control. Let's go home, she said quietly. Minjae's smile was soft and genuine. Home? Your place, my place, I don't care. Somewhere that's ours. As they walked away from the party, leaving Matthias to face the wreckage of his own making, Sienna felt lighter than she had in years. She'd chosen love over safety, truth over comfort, a dangerous future over a predictable past. And for the first time, she was certain she'd made the right choice. In the car, as Los Angeles blurred past the windows, Minjae took her hand again. Are you sure? He asked. About this? About us? About everything that comes with it? Sienna thought about the question seriously. She thought about the risks, the complications, the way her life would change. She thought about the man beside her, complex, dangerous, but fundamentally good in ways that mattered. I'm sure, she said. I'll treat you right too if you let me. Minjae's laugh was surprised and delighted. I'd like that very much. As they drove toward whatever future awaited them, Sienna realized that sometimes the most dangerous choice was also the most honest one. And sometimes, if you were very lucky, honesty was rewarded with the kind of love that changed everything. Years later, Sienna would look back on that night at the Chateau Marmont as the moment her real life began. Not because it was dramatic or romantic, but because it was the first time she'd chosen herself, her own happiness, her own future, her own definition of what love should look like. The design studio she'd dreamed of became reality within 6 months, funded by a silent investor who happened to own half of Koreatown. Her work flourished under Minjae's protection, her reputation growing as word spread that she was under the care of someone who valued excellence and loyalty above all else. Minjae's business evolved too, gradually shifting from the shadows toward legitimacy. It was slow work, generational work, but Sienna's influence helped him see possibilities he'd never imagined. The warehouse that had once stored questionable cargo became a community center. The shipping routes that had carried human misery now brought fair trade goods and legitimate imports. They married in a small ceremony in his rooftop garden, surrounded by bonsai trees and the people who mattered most. Sienna's family embraced Minjae with the warmth they showed all their own, while his associates learned to respect the woman who'd brought light into their boss's carefully controlled world. I love you, Minjae whispered, as they danced under string lights and stars, the city sparkling below them. I love you too, Sienna replied, her voice filled with the same emotion. His smile was radiant. You say it perfectly. I had a good teacher. As for Mateus, he faded into the kind of obscurity that awaited people who confused attention with importance. His attempts at a comeback were met with indifference from an internet that had already moved on to newer, shinier objects. He eventually left Los Angeles altogether, chasing relevance in smaller markets where his past couldn't follow. But Sienna rarely thought about him anymore. Her life was too full of better things: morning coffee with her husband while he tended his trees, late nights working on designs that challenged and fulfilled her, quiet moments when Min-jae would speak to her in English about Korean traditions, and she'd understand not just the words but the love behind them. "Do you ever regret it?" Min-jae asked one evening as they sat in their garden, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of gold and pink. "Regret what?" "Choosing this life, choosing me, all the complications that came with it." Sienna considered the question seriously, as she always did. Their life wasn't simple. There were still security concerns, still business rivals who saw her as a potential weakness, still moments when Min-jae's past cast shadows over their present. But there were also Sunday mornings, when he made her Korean pancakes, while teaching her new phrases in English. There were gallery openings, where he stood proudly beside her work, his presence ensuring that no one dared to dismiss or diminish her talent. There were quiet nights when he held her close and whispered promises in 2 languages, both of them meaning the same thing: forever. "Never," she said, leaning into his warmth. "I regret the time I wasted before I found you, but never the choice to stay." Min-jae pressed a kiss to the top of her head, breathing in the scent of her hair. "I'll treat you right," he murmured, echoing the promise he'd made that first night. "I know," Sienna replied. "You always do." And in the growing darkness of another Los Angeles evening, surrounded by the life they'd built together from honesty and hope and the kind of love that transforms everything it touches, they sat in perfect contentment. 2 people who'd found in each other exactly what they never knew they were missing. Thanks for watching until the end. Korean Mafia Lovers has many more captivating stories. Join our family by subscribing, because your support helps us continue creating these incredible emotional journeys that touch your heart.